And we have Michael Cook on the line from New Zealand. He's with Creation Ministries International, and it's awesome to have you back on the line, Michael.
Thank you, Mick. It's a real privilege to be back joining with our Australian friends. So good evening, or in our case, good afternoon in your case. It's great to be back, and I look forward to sharing some time with you today.
Yes, well, I know last time we spoke, we had a bit of a chat about artificial intelligence, and I even mentioned yesterday to anybody who might, have any more questions, particularly anything to do with technology, and then I did add to that, anything to do with aliens or maybe dinosaurs or creation or evolution. Definitely send your questions through to us. Just text 0401 949 949. Now, Michael, last time we had a decent sort of chat about AI, but we've had a few chats about AI lately, and reason being it is just so in our face in the media. You can't get away from these chats about AI, and in the last week or two, there's been a lot more news from different organisations and people who seem to have this massive fear of AI. Have you noticed that?
Yes, there are certainly lots of people who see it as a major threat, not only for, cyber security and democracy, but also are we going to lose our jobs, and et cetera, some of which are valid concerns. But I was mentioning before we came on air, Mick, in our latest Creation magazine is one of our flagstaff resources, there's actually a very in-depth article exactly about AI, ChatGPT, artificially generated artwork and music, and it's a really well-written article. So if any of your listeners get Creation magazine, they'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's definitely worth looking at. Now, as far as the fear is concerned, Michael, I've had even just people I know talking to me in the last few weeks about artificial intelligence because it's so in the news, and people start then saying, oh yeah, you've seen that movie Terminator, and do you think that's going to happen, and is an AI going to go and build a robot, and is the robot then going to build more robots, and they talk about this whole thing getting out of control. Now, maybe one day in the future, cool. What's the chance of anything like that happening now?
Well, again, this article actually very clearly points out that AI, it's really not sentient. It's not actually like it's got its own intelligence, consciousness, and can make decisions outside of what it's been programmed to do. So it's a very powerful tool for searching and crunching numbers. But yeah, of course, we as humans, all this has been designed by very intelligent people with amazing technology. But the whole Terminator idea of Skynet becoming sentient and taking over the world and so on, that, I think, is a fairly extreme concern that is unlikely. But there are, like any technology, it can be used for incredible evil and it can be used for incredible good. So I think it's one of these things, it's not going to go away, and we need to become aware of it, use it as required, and be, careful.
Now, of course, we shouldn't fear things that haven't already happened. Too often people, spend a lot of their life fearing and being afraid of something that hasn't yet happened, and it may never, ever happen. And so, we shouldn't fear it as such at this stage unless, something sort of jumps out in front of us and we have a reason to really fear it. But a lot of the fear at the moment is unfounded. It's fear based on some very creative people's version of what the future might look like. Can you add anything to that?
I think it's right. As believers, if you have a faith in Jesus and follow Him, we are, we not have a spirit of fear, but we have a sound mind, and we continue to trust Him, and we need to be aware of what's happening. But in some ways, it's nothing new under the sun, as it says in Ecclesiastes. Certainly, the technology is amazing today, but the heart of man and the creativity of man is really unchanged, and so I think we've just got a new flavour of an old problem and an old opportunity.
In the last sort of probably 72 hours, I've seen stories in regards to Google. They've recently asked their staff to stop using Bard, which of course is the Google artificial intelligence. and they're telling them to stop using it because they don't believe it's secure enough. Interesting, because it's their own software. But again, that's not a major fear to have. Basically what they're saying is don't put any secrets into Bard because it is learning off other people's stuff, and basically in many ways it's sharing information because it draws on the same information that it's being given.
That's right, and it's probably a salient warning for us all. Remembering whatever we put on the internet can be used. It basically doesn't disappear, so we need to be careful what we put up. And so, I think if you use these tools with the idea that is there anything I'm really concerned about being in the public domain, no problem. If there is, then be careful, I think.
Yeah, and then recently we've seen a lot of other little bits of software popping up that not the ChatGPT or Bard. There's other bits of software like Microsoft's brought out their image creator, and I think Meta has just released a new, audio file software, and more people are able to recreate images, video, and audio they could have video of me. They've got video of people like Donald Trump. They've got video of Elon Musk doing and saying things that, they come out and say, well, hang on, I didn't even say that. Where's this stuff coming from? And it's now so, almost perfect that we look at it and go, well, yeah, that looks absolutely right, but it's not. So
exactly, that's why. We need to test all things. And it says 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Obviously that's mainly aimed at prophecy and so on, but also applies to just make sure you test things, hold it lightly, and do your sort of fact checking on it. Because yes, there's many opportunities to be deceived today. Well, things that seem right, look good, sound believable, but we just need to be careful and trust that God will show us deception, but also enable us to enjoy truth when it's there.
And what's the best? If we see stuff like this on the internet, a news article of Donald Trump saying something, we've got to be so careful. The Bible says, "Do not judge," but so many people they've already judged, and they have opinions on so many people and things going on in the world. Yet we know that it's so easy for these things to be created.
It is, and I think that's why we need to exercise caution when something is read and it goes, we don't instantly just go and forward it on or share it or post it without careful thought, because that's how these things multiply. They want you to get clicks and to likes and to share, and so if we do that without thinking, then we're just adding to the problem. But if we look at it, weigh it up and think, well, this is useful, I believe it's true, and then you can share it carefully, but not just click and think later.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, we're going to go into a little break now. And if anyone does have any questions, particularly about AI and technology, Michael is a bit of a technology buff. In fact, you're on 94.9. It is 22 minutes to 5, and we have Mike Cook on the line. Michael Cook from New Zealand, Creation Ministries International. And he can answer your questions. If you have any questions, send them through to our text line, 0401 949 949. Now, Michael, we've had an interesting talk about, artificial intelligence. And one thing I'd like to ask you do a bit of speaking, don't you, for Creation Ministries over in New Zealand?
That's right. I'm one of the speaking team over here, and I sort of generally focus on the central North Island, around where we live. But, we have got a great team of speakers, and it's a real blessing to go mainly to churches, and we're just there to equip and to help people. We're guests in churches, and we link people to resources that will help them to have a stronger faith and to reach out to those who need to hear the gospel.
Okay, and I know you've got a background in electronics and technology and everything else, so it's good to talk to you about things like artificial intelligence. But while you're out speaking, you no doubt have question and answer sessions. I'd like to ask, do you have any particular questions that you've had asked recently that have been interesting, a little sort of left field?
Well, yes, I did an event actually just last week, in a church. It was a public meeting, and there were two questions there. One was around the whole thing of climate change and fossil fuels, and the question was, aren't the fossil fuels all going to run out soon, was one question. But another one said, this was actually an ethnic church, and they said, why is Christianity mainly a white religion in the West? Which actually is not the case at all, but it was a good question, is Christianity just a Western religion? And so this whole idea of worldview and what we believe led to some interesting discussion.
And you mentioned during the break there as well a term which I wasn't particularly au fait with, objective truth, and something that's happening in the world today. It's part of this. It sounds like it's part of the whole woke thing that's going on. But objective truth, can you explain that to me a little bit more?
Well, that's right. Objective truth basically means you have a solid truth that there is something that is true, and you can clearly see that that's true and that's false. But this whole idea is what we call postmodernism, this idea of it's a post-truth society we live in now, that basically the idea of objective truth, as in maybe like the Bible says that it contains truth and or is the Word of God, that's narrow-minded, exclusive, and we need to have the idea that truth is subjective. You make up your own truth. What's true for Mick is fine for him, but what's true for somebody else? And so we have this idea of subjective truth, that truth evolves and people have their own truth, and you cannot know real truth, etc. And it's becoming very common, I find, in discussions or things, especially young people, who this idea that you can't really know what's true and what's false, and if you say there is, then you're being narrow-minded or bigoted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the world has had a huge change in the last 10 years where, men and women are no longer necessarily men and women. Men can be women, women can be men. So all of a sudden, this whole thing about truth, what we used to know as something that was true, isn't necessarily as true anymore because people can choose. And I'll tell you what, there's been a lot in the media over the last few weeks, backlash against, I guess biological male, is that how you say it nowadays? I don't even know the proper term. You get to a point where it's like, I don't even know what to call you. Are you a man or a woman or I don't know what they call them when they've sort of changed. Anyway, the issue nowadays is sport. And it's been talked about in sport a lot. Even here on the Central Coast, we've got like FIFA World Cup coming here. And I told one of my mates the other day, FIFA World Cup. He's gone, what, here? And I went, yeah. And he said, no, I would have heard about that. And I said, yeah, it's the women's. And he had a laugh. And I said, well, actually, I believe there's some biological males or whatever, I'm not sure what the term is now, who'll be playing. He said, okay, so it's not women's, it's a bit of a mixed. And I started thinking, I don't know now. I'm almost like afraid to say anything because I don't know what terms to use, and I'm not sure. But there's been these massive changes, and I guess that's objective truth, isn't it?
Well, it is. The Bible talks in Genesis, doesn't it, that God created man in his own image, male and female, he created them. That's what we'd say is objective. It's an objective statement. It's either true or false, so there's no real, it's very clear cut. But yes, we even in the last day or two over here in New Zealand, we've had a teacher who was deregistered because he is a Christian, but he was in a school and he refused to use the preferred pronoun of a young person who was saying they should. So he was basically sacked and had his teacher's registration taken away because he refused to go down that track. So it's increasingly becoming a polarising and difficult topic, isn't it?
Mm. Particularly in sport, and they're saying that, even with, for instance, the World Cup that's coming here, we've got two of the world's best, number 2 and number 4 in the world teams coming here to the Central Coast, and this will be their base during the World Cup. But they've been talking about FIFA. They're saying, we're going to be, letting the world know very soon whether we will allow somebody who was born male to continue playing in these top-end teams. Sadly, it won't be before the World Cup here in Australia. But just the media, the talk, the chat, it's very interesting. And there seems to be a bit of a backlash worldwide, because I don't know what it was like for you guys. I know we had a vote pretty much. Do we allow people to, marry, gay marriages and that sort of thing? And whilst a lot of people and even a lot of Christians ticked that box, there was a lot of other boxes that weren't even questions, that weren't even in there, that it seems like it's assumed that all those boxes have been ticked. And so many people now, when we're going back to this objective truth, they've made decisions in their own mind. And young people, I guess it's a big issue for them nowadays, because they're watching the world change around them. And so it's easier to say, hey, truth's my truth, isn't it?
That's right. And a lot of these things start off with, just being kind and being tolerant and allowing people to, if they just love each other, what's the problem? But you're finding more and more, and with euthanasia and, abortion and marriage redefinition, all these things start off, but it is a slippery slope. And sadly, we heard the other day there was a survey done in Canada where euthanasia has had a few years to run now, and now young people, 18 to 35, I think 54% said they would be accepting of euthanasia for people who are homeless or in poverty, to help them if they're suffering. And so you see this slippery slope of redefinition of one thing. It starts to become more, it's just tragic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And of course now, it's not just gay marriage, we now have potentially polyamory, where you can marry more than one person, and you can marry or have sexual relations with underage people, as long as it's consensual, blah blah blah. So you see the whole slippery slope of once something starts, there's no boundaries anymore.
Yeah, and what were they doing in Sodom and Gomorrah?
Well, yes, that's right, and they came unstuck. And the sad thing is, some of these people who go along, they're actually victims, aren't they? I just grieve with young people who are really making decisions that are going to affect them for the rest of their lives, and that's why I think we just have to lovingly but firmly stick with the truth and really help to point them to a way that's better. Yeah.
And of course, the better way is in the book.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Our Creator knows. He created us. He knows how we work and how we best function and thrive. And none of us are perfect. I certainly aren't, but I think we do well if we can follow the instructor's manual.
Do you often speak to young people when you do talks?
The various churches often have more older people, but I really enjoy relating to young people, even though I'm sort of in my early 60s now. But I find that young people actually, rather than thinking I'm some old duffer, that if you lovingly and respectfully talk with them and listen to what they're saying, the age doesn't really matter. And I get a real buzz from talking with young people, hearing questions they have and hearing where they're coming from. So yes, I enjoy and do have opportunities to speak to even high schools, a Christian high school over here, and youth groups in churches.
And how do you find their questions differ from those slightly older people in the community?
I think some of the ones they have, like surely what about death and suffering? Why is that? How can a loving God allow that to happen? Or sometimes some of the Old Testament things in there, or surely you're a thinking person, you're an electronics engineer. How can you not believe in evolution? This sort of thing. So these are good questions, and we can start to tease out what they believe and what the word evolution actually means.
And what is your answer to that question?
I say it depends. Can you just let me know what do you mean by evolution? That's the first thing. Is let's define what the term is, and then you start to talk. Well, is it just change? Well, yes, animals change, but is the change that we observe, is it going in the right direction for upwards increasing complexity and evolution? And we see no, things are falling apart, and so once they understand that, go, oh, okay, yeah. So you need to make sure we're talking on the same wavelength, and then the world becomes a lot clearer for both sides, I guess.
I mean, we've been getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and when you read the Bible and look at sort of the age of people, lifespans have been getting shorter and shorter and shorter. But there's now people saying that they expect or assume that will change in the near future.
That's right. Yeah, I was just mentioning one of our recent info bites email newsletters, which I really encourage your listeners. If you go to creation.com, you can sign up for that, and there's many excellent articles coming out regularly touching on different topics. And one it's titled, "Can Death Be Abolished?" The idea of a 1,000-year lifespan. Science may be able to turn around the effects of aging and help us to live for hundreds of years. And it's different things. Some scientists are skeptical, other ones say there's potential, but this idea of trying to roll back aging and to live forever is a human yearning, isn't it?
Yeah. Tell you what, we might even try and unpack that one a little more next week. Michael, I believe you'll be with us again next week, won't you? Yeah.
Yes, I believe so. I'm looking forward to that, Mac. Thank you.
Alrighty, well that sounds sensational. Look, we've come to the end of our time. Michael, thank you so much for your time this week. What time is it in New Zealand, by the way?
It's just coming up to 10 to 7 in the evening, and I think the shortest day is a couple of days away, which will be for you. So yes, we're in the middle of, now it's getting cold, and so almost 7 o'clock at night.
Is there much snow in your mountains over there?
Down the South Island, yes, so lots of Australians come on over. Good skiing down there. North Island struggling with some of the ski fields financially, not so much snow, but sorry, not so much about snow. It's more about finance. But anyway, good skiing over here. We'd love to see you.
It sounds awesome. Well, thank you, Michael. You are on.